Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. Welcome, everybody, back to Trail Signs. And today we're going to once again see where those signs are pointing us to. Today's co host, I've been calling it co host instead of guest, I think, because it's back and forth.
That
And
scares me a
I
little
don't,
bit as a co-host.
I feel weird being a host. So,
There.
we got Mark from Tri Duty on the Trail. So Mark is a person who started following me, and I started following him back. And I was actually watching his latest video just before we got on here. And what I love about your videos is it makes me very nostalgic for the Midwest because I'm from the Midwest as well. And but anyways, enough about me. Let's talk about you. Tell me a little bit about you and your background, whatever you want to share,
Sure.
and we'll go from there.
Deal. Sounds good. So yeah, my name's Mark. I started the channel back in 2020, late 2020, 2021, something like that. And it's called Tri Duty on the Trail. And I am sometimes asked what does Tri Duty even mean? Because it's kind of a silly sounding name. And it's actually, my kids used to call me Duty, and like daddy duty. I don't know if there's a poop joke in there, probably because they were young. And then when I started doing triathlons, they threw the tri as part of that. So they've been calling me Tri Duty for a long time now. And they say it's my
Awesome.
trail name, even though it's not a trail name because it was never given to me on a trail, but that's a whole nother story. So
I
anyway,
feel like it counts.
I don't know, man. I don't know. But yeah, but I'm from the Metro Detroit area and get out to Michigan pretty frequently and just really, really enjoy the solitude and the quiet and the just getting away and enjoying the outdoors. And it's been fun to make the videos, and really the whole reason I started it in the first place was just to share with my family and some of my friends that were interested. And even for me, it's kind of selfish because I can go back and kind of relive the adventure. You know what I mean? And
100%.
yeah, and so I really really love it. I've been surprised that as many people enjoy the videos, honestly. But it's really cool that, like we talked a little bit earlier. I mean, the community is just really really encouraging and supportive, and really really awesome. I mean, shoot, I mean, I made some good friends through this. In fact, I mean, Jared Snackbox, hiked a big chunk of the JMT with him last year, and we met through YouTube. It's crazy, really
Yeah,
crazy.
I saw that and was instantly jealous. I'm like, I didn't get an invitation. Of course, at the time, it would have been hard for me to get there, but
Well, so
it's a
just to be clear, so what happened was I actually had gotten permission from, I say permission. My wife gave me the blessing though to go in 2024, and I was like, "Hey, Jared, I know you've done this. I'm going to need your help." And he's like, actually, I just got a permit in 3 weeks if you want to come. And so the
no,
stars aligned.
no, that's awesome. I'm glad you guys got to go. And I was just kidding. I wasn't really that upset because anytime anybody gets out, it's awesome. And I was hoping to go down to California to hike somewhere similar to that with another YouTube friend of mine, Jim. And
Mhm.
I looked at the cost of flights and I was like, ooh. So there are some drawbacks to
For
working in
sure.
retail, and that's definitely one of them.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, but yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I look forward to having a bit of banter with you.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I agree. It's funny. I did the same. I kind of started my channel the same way. It was just started out as just sharing with friends and being able to look back on it. And as we mentioned, it was kind of surprised by how supportive it was and how I got a chance to meet some really awesome people, which is why I decided to kind of do this because it gave me an excuse to kind of get to know some of those people a little bit better and pick their brain and talk a little bit of trail life. So um,
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely.
awesome. Well, I think you answered some of my questions there, which is awesome. So my other question would be, what has been your favorite part of doing your channel?
So yeah, it's a good question. So usually when I get back from a trip, like I almost go like right into, all right, I'm gonna lay it all out and start working on the video. And so I really enjoy, just for lack of a better word, just reliving that adventure. Um, but what I was surprised that I enjoyed is a lot of folks that ask questions looking for help. and being able to just help answer those questions and give a little education and that sort of thing. I mean, shoot, even taking folks on their first trip, I've done that a few times, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, not that I'm anybody, right? I mean, I've gone on some trips and I know a little bit about what I'm doing, I think. And, taking folks that have never done it has been amazing. And it's a really, really fun time. In fact, one guy even said after I put the video up, he's like, this was the best souvenir that I've ever gotten, just because I made the video of our trip. So that's really kind of special to me.
That is awesome. Like, yeah, you can't put a price on that because, what else could you say other than like, I think it's so much fun to be able to facilitate that aha moment with that person when they go
Right
on
on.
their first trip and maybe experience some of what we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But yeah, that's definitely awesome. So yeah, again, it's really cool to for me, my favorite part of of this experience so far has been the community. So
Yeah,
definitely along that. So
absolutely.
all right. So yeah, on to our subject matter for the evening. We're going to talk a little bit about something that has to do with the backpackers all kind of experience and know. And I decided on this subject after reading your channel description, and you
Which is
put in
terrible.
there
It's a
that
terrible description, and I need to
it
to
is not.
make it a little
No,
more robust.
it's all. It was just fine, my friend. But there is a line in there that says you love Type 2 fun. And we often will hear about people in the backcountry talking about Type 2 fun. And so I just want to know what, in your opinion, what does Type 2 fun mean to you?
Well, so I had never really heard this term until, I don't know, probably the last 10 or 15 years, maybe, and didn't really think a whole lot of it. But and we'll get into the experiences soon enough, but um, Type 2 fun, when in the moment it's the most horrible, awful experience, maybe not most, but a pretty, right? Think it sucks. And then, you know, the next day, the next week, next month, or you look back a year or two, 10, 15 years later, and it's like, man, that was awesome. Man, that was such a great time. And I've lived a lot of those, and it's just a strange phenomenon for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's always funny because you have those moments and you think to yourself, this is dumb. Why am I doing this? Why am I torturing myself? I could be at home, doing so much other things. But then, I don't know if it's our brain's default setting to kind of pick out the good versus all of the bad. But it never fails me that I look back on those trips that were just a little bit harder, and I think that was the best trip ever. And I've
Yep.
had trips that have gone flawlessly, and I still enjoyed those trips, but I don't think about those quite as much as those trips that was just like, at the moment, I was just like,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
it makes no sense, right? I mean, it's just a strange thing in your brain or something. I don't know. It's weird.
well, I would make the argument that most people who spend any kind of time backpacking on a regular basis have something wrong with their brain, anyways. That we kind of intentionally look out these opportunities to just be
Mhm.
flat miserable and
Fair.
then absolutely love it while we're doing it. But then again, I would also make the argument that secretly people who may judge us for that also are like, man, that looks like it was a really cool time. And so, I think the only difference is
Right.
that some of us are more willing to kind of engage in that versus other people that are like, man, screw this.
That's right. Embrace the suck, man. That's what we always say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how this works out because I was listening to a podcast on my way to the coffee shop today as I walk where most places I go now. But I was listening to this podcast and they were quoting a women's basketball coach, and unfortunately, they didn't know the quote, and I wasn't able to find it. But paraphrasing wise, they said, um, oftentimes we're all kind of waiting for that moment where things got easy, where life gets easier, things get easier, and things never get easier. We just get better at doing the hard things. And I was like, wow, that's really kind of
Yeah.
profound,
Hmm.
I think, along in the signs of this, because it's like every backpacking trip you go on, there's going to be something that's going to be like, oh, this is terrible. But like if you do it long enough, I think we just get really good at coming up with ways to kind of push through some of that.
Absolutely right. Totally agree with you. Totally agree.
Right on. So along those lines, so let's hear some stories, man. I want to hear stories. What some of the examples of type 2 fun that you've experienced, like your favorites?
Well, so the first one that came to mind, so because I made a short list, and I'll try not to bore you too much, but the
No.
first one that ever, I guess I didn't no idea what type 2 fun was, and I was 15 years old, and I was in the Boy Scouts, and we had done some small backpacking trips here and there, but we had signed up to go to Philmont, and Philmont's in New Mexico. It's a pretty popular Boy Scout. I mean, there's miles and miles and mountains, and it's amazing.
My
You're familiar with it?
my first ever backpacking trip, 1997, Philmont, New Mexico.
Yeah,
I've been there.
1991 is when I went. Yeah, so
And also had some type 2 fun there myself.
yeah, so I had no idea what I was in for, because we did 110 miles over 10 days, and we hit Tooth of Time and Mount Baldy, some of the iconic sites there, and I don't know, probably a few days in, I didn't really know what trench foot was, but I learned very quickly what it was, and it was horrible. It was horrible. And so, I managed to deal with it. And of course, we had enchilada dinners and stuff. I mean, this was like when external frame packs were just normal. I mean, internal frame packs they were just starting to catch a little traction. And so this was, ultralight wasn't even a thing. And I mean, it was just a whole different world. I mean, you're probably pretty familiar with some of that to a degree, but in the moment, I mean, in fact, there's a song by the Beach Boys called Sloop John B. I don't know if you know it. It's this is the worst trip we've ever been on. We sang that the whole 10 days. But I'll tell you, even before we left New Mexico, it was like, oh man, do you remember that? Oh, that was so, I mean, it was just and we talk about it to this day. I mean, with my friends, my brother was on the trip, and we still talk about, you remember this? And you remember when you put that big rock in Anson's pack because he wasn't carrying any crew gear? And I mean, that one was hilarious. There was one guy, he didn't carry any crew gear one day, and my brother, he found out, and he put this big rock underneath his clothes in his pack. And the next day,
that's appropriate.
Yeah,
that's appropriate, because that's sacrilege right there. Not carrying crew gear.
Yeah, that was. But anyways, yeah, I mean, looking back, I mean, even I was looking at the pictures yesterday after kind of getting ready for this, and I was like, oh man, that was so great. Oh, that was so cool. I mean, because you were familiar with Tooth of Time, right?
Oh yeah, I think we might have done the same trip, because I was the same mileage, same length. We did Mount Baldy as a side trip.
Us too.
So yep. And then we were supposed to get into Tooth of Time for our. We weren't actually going to camp at Tooth of Time, but we were going to hike Tooth of Time. But what we ended up doing was, and this is part of my type 2 fun, is we did this just massive slog hike the second to last day, and we made it to the Tooth of Time camp because one of the guys in our adult groups had already been done there, and he really wanted us to experience sunrise on the Tooth of Time.
Yep.
And so we did, and we expected to be like hiking all day, so we just like slugged through it, and we got there like at noon. And so we were just like dead the whole rest of the day. But we did get to see the sunrise on Tooth of Time, which was just amazing. And like we're like watching storms like moving below us. And so the night before that, we had camped at a place where overlooked the town of Cimarron.
Oh yeah.
And we watched a storm go through there. We found out later there was actually a tornado that had touched down. So we were watching that, and we had that in our mind as we were like chasing these storms. We're like, oh man, we are so gonna die.
I hear you. We got caught. We were actually in a thunderstorm on top of Tooth of Time, and everybody was like running down into the tree line. I mean, that was like there's lightning and thunder. I mean, it was so I know exactly what you're saying. It's pretty volatile there.
Yeah, that's some exposed ground for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's cool. I
yeah.
had no idea. Were you a Boy Scout then?
So, yeah, so I was a scout, and that's kind of how I got into this. Side story. A lot of people probably heard this already, but yeah, our troop was pretty busy. We did a lot of different things. We didn't do a lot of backpacking per se until we did that trip, and
Mhm.
but yeah, I was a scout. I was not a great scout. I was more about having experiences than I was doing the actual work. So I never achieved my
Gotcha.
Eagle Scout or anything. And then, interestingly enough, technically I was an explorer when I went to Philmont because I had turned 18 like
Oh, okay.
4 months before.
Yep.
So I registered when I was 17, but yeah, so technically I was an explorer. They weren't ready to make me an adult leader yet. So, but that's how I got to go to Philmont.
That's cool. That's cool. It's a really special place. I'd love to go back one day. It holds
Oh,
a
me
lot of
too.
special memories. It really does.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I totally 100% agree. I pull out the book every once in a while. I'm still friends with several other people. In fact, that adult leader that didn't force us. It told us to do the Tooth of Time sunrise thing. His name's Paul, and I had a lot of Type 2 fun on that trip. I had really gnarly blisters. I didn't break my boots in, and so it was kind of a struggle. And I remember him pulling aside. It's like a perfect example of like Type 2 fun. And he pulled me aside and he said, really the thing that really makes or breaks a trip is your mentality in that trip. And
That's
he's like,
it.
you can either choose to be miserable or you can choose to just suck it up and go forward. And that always stuck with me. And so, interestingly enough, I'm the only person other than him who has done backpacking since that trip.
Is that right?
Yep.
Wow.
So,
That's awesome. Very cool. I had
yeah,
no
no,
idea we had that in common.
yeah, no, that's cool. I didn't either, but that's awesome. Yeah. So we'll have to trade more of those stories, and we won't bore the
Absolutely.
other people here. But so that's awesome. So any other like stories you have,
From Philmont or just in general?
or any of the Type 2 fun, just any of the other
Yeah.
things you wanted to.
So more recently, I actually went on a trip. It was I think March of last year with my brother-in-law, actually two of my brother-in-laws and my nephew. And so this was in southern Indiana, and it's called the Adventure Hiking Trail. And to me it sounded like, what a stupid name, right? In fact, we were making fun of, the Adventure Hiking Trail. It's like the Walt Disney Trail or whatever, right? Well, we didn't know kind of what we were getting into. We knew, but we didn't know. So I'd done all the research, and I knew it was kind of, there's some nice hills and whatnot. But when we started that trail, there were flash flood warnings that we didn't know about, and there were some tornado warnings that happened as we were out on the trail. And so we got probably 6 or 7 miles in, and we got this alert on our phone. It's like, seek shelter immediately, 80+ mile-an-hour winds, and we're in the middle of the wilderness here, and we're like, oh crap. And so
Shelter's not a thing.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, what are we gonna do, right? And so I don't know, we kind of talking about what we should do, and it's only like a 30-hour window we have to really be worried about the wind. And we end up finding a shelter, and but that wasn't before we actually saw like big tree branches falling and all this stuff like right on the trail by us. And so we're like, let's get somewhere. So anyway, we do, no problem, everything's good, the wind dies down more or less. And so we have about maybe 4 miles to go till we get to our shelter. Well, this particular location is notorious for having like no water at all. You have to cache water because all of the creeks and everything are dry beds. Well, not this time. So all of the creeks are overflowing, like waist deep water crossings, and there's no bridges to get across them or anything. And we got through everything for the most part pretty good. We had one more to go before we got to our shelter, and it was moving, like really moving fast. And we looked all up and down trying to find a way across. And I said, you know what, guys, I'm just gonna go and try and get across. And if I make it, then we'll figure out a way to get you guys across too. So we made it across, but it was like, I don't know, it was scary in the moment. But as my brother-in-law came across, my older brother-in-law, I was like, man, I'm really sorry. I know you didn't want to do that. And he's like, oh, we're going to talk about this for the rest of our life. Like, right, we are. because that's immediately he knew, right? This sucks. And then as soon as it was over, it's like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Perfect example of type 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, my one of the stories I always use for type 2 is actually also ended up being one of my absolute favorite trips ever, and a location that's one of my favorite ones. But it was one of the first trips that I did when I moved out here. And at the time, I've talked a lot about my health, and fitness levels and stuff, and battling my weight and stuff. But at the time, I had not, even started that, and so I was pretty out of shape, and I had a hernia that hadn't been repaired yet. It's terrible, terrible advice. You should never do these things, but I did them. And I was going out on the first ever backpacking trip with my best friend, who, I call him the human mountain goat because this guy, he's unhuman. First off, he's almost half my age. Um, and the reason I call him the human mountain goat is because most people, when they go on an incline, they slow down. It has zero impact on this kid.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
he just shoots right up. And so we were doing the Sundance Pass, and it's 11,000 foot pass, which is unheard of in the Midwest. But here we were, and the first hike up you is a 2-day hike, and so we were going up to hike at this lake, and we were going to camp at this lake. And I'm just dying. Like, I haven't seen Alex for hours at this point because he's just gone. And so I'm just angry at the world. Like, I'm dying. I can't like take more than a few steps at a time and the stop and everything. And here I am supposed to be this person who's gone to college for outdoor leadership, and I can't even get up a damn hill. And so I was just very much self-hating at that point.
Hmm.
And Alex comes bounding down the hill, with no pack on, and he's like, "Hey, I found a campsite." And I was like, "Oh, cool, man! I'm so ready." And from the deepest like part of his heart, like generous, he's like, "Hey, do you want me to carry your pack for you?" And I'm like, "No, I'll do this myself," because I was determined at that point. And
Yeah.
this poor guy, like, "Oh yeah, sorry, no problem." I apologized later, and he thought it was funny. But yeah, so we get to camp, and then the next day we go up, and we finally get up to the top of this pass, and it's awesome. And but I'm dying, and then the other side, the part they don't really tell you about, is the downside. And in this case, it's 58 switchbacks
Oh,
and
yeah.
about 2,000 feet of elevation straight down the side of this mountain, completely exposed. There's no trees, no nothing.
Oh,
I'm a
wow.
ginger. That's going to play later. Um, and so we get down, and there's snow on the other side, and there's this big snowshoe. And Alex, being the guy he is, and I love this guy to death, but yeah, at the time I was just like, dude, he's like, I'm just going to stay down. And so he jumps into the snow and just slides all the way down the side of the mountain. And I'm like, well, I'm not doing that. I'll die. So I have to hike all the way down the rest of this. And so I'm already kind of grumbling underneath my voice. And I get into a snow patch, and my hike trekking pole gets stuck in the snow and the rocks. And so I try to yank it out, and the whole pole comes apart. So now
Oh,
I have to dig the thing out of this like stupid trail, and I'm yanking on it. And the entire time, all the sun is like blinding me from the snow as reflecting up. I end up with this terrible sunburn because, again, ginger. And so I'm like, God damn, man. So I get the pole out, and I'm making my way down, and I'm about halfway down, and who comes up the hill? Alex. No pack. Oh, that was really fun. I'm going to go do that again. Takes off up the hill. I'm
no
like, you
way.
mother. So at this point, I'm about like 5 minutes and one bad word away from like strangling him with a pack strap. And so finally I get down, and like my shoes are like, I'm getting blisters on my toes, and I get down, I'm sitting on this rock, and I take my shoes off, and it's got blisters all over my toes. And I literally just took my trekking pole and just chucked it down the rest of the hill. I was so angry. And I vowed I was never going to do this again. Like, screw John Muir. The mountains need to call somebody who actually still gives a shit. I'm done. If I'm married to the mountains, I'm calling a divorce attorney because this is over. And so we make it down the rest of the hill. We get to a campsite. It's beautiful, right next to the river, mountains in the background. There's a swimming hole. We dump in the water. And ever since then, it's been my absolute favorite trip. I've been back to Sundance Pass at least 4 times.
Wow.
However, I go the opposite direction because I vowed never to go down those switchbacks again, ever. So anybody who goes on that trip with me, they have to be willing to go the west to the lake. But anyways, yeah,
That's awesome.
it's funny. I laugh about it now, but like at the time, I was just so angry. But like I look back and I was like, man, that was the best trip I had. Alex and I became best friends, and we've been on some great trips since then. And it's still to this day one of my absolute favorite trips.
That's
All
awesome.
that stuff aside, so. Yeah, so it's just funny because it's like you don't really realize how important those moments are at the time because all you want to do is forget about them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But then, like, they make such great stories, and I think that's the main reason why is because we love to tell type 2 stories around the campfire.
That's true. You're right. You're absolutely right. Wow, that's cool. Very cool.
Awesome. So I'm trying to keep these around 30 minutes. So
Okay.
we got one more question. But I love your stories. Awesome. They were awesome. Like,
Oh, likewise.
really great.
Likewise.
So, but as I kind of mentioned, at the time, you don't really realize that. I think you and your brother-in-law probably didn't realize it at the time that it was going to become your favorite story. But, in my experience, people usually don't realize that they're experiencing type 2 fun in the moment. So,
Right.
what advice do you have for people to make the best of a situation while they will most likely look back on as a sucked in the moment, but later was a good time or at least a good story?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and you touched on it earlier because to me it's all about your attitude. Because I've gone backpacking with folks that have really great attitudes, and they understand that it's getting painful, but their attitude makes it thoroughly enjoyable, right? I have also been on trips with folks that have really, really bad attitudes, and they ruin the trip for everyone.
Absolutely.
And um, I realize type 2 fun isn't for everybody. And not everybody appreciates it even after the fact, which I don't understand, but that seems to be the case. But yeah, it's almost when you go into whatever it is, whether it's backpacking or, I mean, because you're running now, right? I mean, for me, running is like a type 2
Oh,
type of thing.
100%.
And so when I know, like, because I've done some marathons and that, and so when running marathons, you have that same, all right, I know this is gonna suck, and you'll have this roller coaster of emotions, and you get it whether it's a 5K, a 10K, a half, whatever. It's that running just does that, and so I know going in, I have to choose my attitude, and it may be easier said than done, because when you hit a low, oh, it's horrible. And it's hard to kind of pull yourself out of it.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into my advice. Because I 100% agree with you. Like that's definitely a lesson that I truly have kept with me throughout life. But as you said, like sometimes those lows just they hit you out of nowhere, and they usually catch you at your most vulnerable point. And even the best person will still have that moment of just absolutely coming apart. It's happened to me, recently when even more recently than that last story, um, uh, I was packing up. It was a second to last day on a 6-day trip. We had been over
Mhm.
like 3 11,000-foot passes. Like, I think we were all pretty haggard at this point, and it had been great weather up until that, but it stormed the entire night before, and it was supposed to be relatively rainy all the next day. And I'm trying to pack up my tent, and it is just sopping wet. And this is the moment I found out that one of my biggest dislikes and I'm getting better at this, but one of my biggest dislikes, for whatever reason, for no legitimate make sense reason, I can't stand packing my tent up wet. I don't know where it comes from, but I'm sitting here stuffing this just sopping wet tent. It's cold. We're in the mountains. It's probably in the 40s. Like
Yep.
I'm just like soaking wet. And I like halfway through stuffing this tent into the stuff sack, I just like out of nowhere, I just took this tent and I threw it up over my head and slammed it down the road and said, "This is bullshit," and just stormed off like total like epic meltdown, like I'm like some sort of teenage kid or something.
Yeah.
And like my hiking mentor Jay comes over and he's like trying to talk me down and everything. I just like needed that moment. Like I'm a pretty emotionally expressive person in general.
Mhm.
So it's not completely unheard of for me, but I was kind of surprised at how visceral this was.
Yep, I get it.
But we got packed up and we took off and we hiked for a little while. We got to a spot and the sun kind of came out and we had our coffee, we had breakfast, we laid everything out. It was all dry by the time we were done. I packed up my now perfectly dry tent. I felt a little sheepish, and the rest of the trip was amazing. But again, and so I think for me, despite the fact that we have those moments, the hardest part I think for us is that we dwell on those things. And I think my advice to anybody, as far especially with type 2 fun, is have a little bit of grace with yourself.
Yeah,
Allow yourself to have those experiences, but like you said, don't dwell on them.
yeah,
But for me, like I remember I was talking to Jay and I was like, I'm a big fraud. I have this channel and I tell people how to do backpacking and I get pissed off because I'm putting my wet tent away. Like, what the hell am I? I'm a fraud.
yeah.
I
But to
didn't
your point,
have
though, having somebody like that, like a support system, I mean, Jared was a huge support when I wanted to curl up on the JMT and cry because I couldn't get a stake in the ground because the ground was too hard. So, I mean, your buddy there was like, it makes a huge difference having good folks around you to support you too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I think that's a good one too to end. Thank you. But yeah, like the people, it's really good to have, good support group. And so, yeah, having grace for yourself, but then also having grace for your hiking partners in
Yeah,
those moments. Like, it's really easy for us to be like, oh, that guy's just a big, you know,
yeah.
I know Jared is a bit of a diva, but it's all right. I hope he watches this later. But he's going to be one of the guests too, by the way. But yeah, so also having that moment, I was fortunate because I felt safe in expressing that around those guys because I knew that they weren't going to be like, dude, like you're a big baby.
Right. Oh yeah.
So yeah, so have grace on yourself, have grace on those around you, and because we're all going to go through those moments. It's just not always flowers and I don't know what else to say.
Rainbows or unicorns, maybe.
Perfect cat holes. I don't know. Well, awesome, man. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up? Or
No, I've really enjoyed talking with you, man. It's been fun, just kind of bantering a bit on it. It's been fun. I really enjoyed it.
yeah, awesome. I know you were a little bit nervous, but I think you did amazing. This was a lot of fun. I'm really glad you came on, and I hope to bring you back for another one if you're up for it.
Absolutely, yeah. And if people will watch, even though I'm here, then even better.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they'll love it. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up because we're hitting that 30-minute mark there, which is for
Perfect.
whatever reason I feel like is a good place to stop. But anyways, for those of you who are watching, what was your most memorable Type 2 fun moment? Throw it down in the comments below. And as always, keep hiking on.